Session 2. Prophet Muhammad, the last and the final prophet, the man for the mankind, ex-Brigadier Mustansir. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin with the name of Allah, who is most gracious and tremendously merciful. Nahmadu nusalli ala Rasulihil Kareem, and blessings on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the last and the final prophet. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani. O Rabb, open my heart and ease my task. Brothers and sisters, we continue with in the introduction of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The message of the Prophet Muhammad, so also the recommended strategy is simple. His message and his recommended strategy is simple. A. Do not create problems, zulm, that is evil, injustice. For this purpose, believe in Allah and follow me. For this purpose, believe in Allah and follow me. B. Order the good and exhort people to refrain from evil. Order the good and exhort people to refrain from evil, as laid down by the Prophet, peace be upon him, that is dawah. That is dawah. C. Prevent people in the world from creating problems, zulm, evil, injustice for the mankind by ensuring the supremacy of the ideological system of Allah through dawah and threat of force. I repeat, prevent people in the world from creating problems, zulm, evil, injustice for the mankind by ensuring the supremacy of the ideological system of Allah through dawah and threat of force. D. Deal with those who cross all the limits of decency and indulge in zulm, that is evil, injustice, by use of force, jihad, whether they be disbelievers or believers. In simple words, every believer is duty-bound to endeavor to earn the pleasure of Allah hereafter and ensure the supremacy of the ideology system ordained by Allah as given by the Prophet, peace be upon him. Any system must have a head, a supreme authority to ensure effective imposition with no parochialism and ensure the system's smooth functioning. As such, the most ideal, pragmatic, realistic system based on the very nature of man given by Allah to the Prophet, that is, to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to maintain the highest standards of human conduct, human rights, man's obligations towards his creator Allah and to the entire mankind, which was established as a caliphate by the most exalted, perfect among the mankind, the infallible Prophet of Allah, Muhammad, peace be upon him. The beauty and the greatest benefit of following the Prophet, peace be upon him, is that his most humble, humane, par excellence, florid conduct, way benefits the one who adapts it and the entire humankind, no matter who follows it, be it a believer or a disbeliever. And this is also true of all the directions, injunctions of Quran, and this is also true of all the directions, injunctions of Quran. For example, take the Quranic injunction. Prepare, it states, prepare any military strength you can muster against them and any cavalry posts that thereby you may dismay the enemies of Allah and your enemies and others besides them whom you know not. Allah knows them. This is Surah 8, Al-Anfal, verse 60. Means not only creating deterrence, achieving a decisive military supremacy, and retaining at all times the ability to be assertive militarily, politically, economically, and culturally. Whether it was the Islamic Caliphate, France, or Great Britain, or now USA, and maybe Israel, China, Russia, India, in the near future, whoever follows Allah's directions, even partly, will be benefited for a certain period of time, believer or disbeliever. Allah's word is eternally true. Allah's word is eternally true. But will any country's status of superpower benefit the humanity, the mankind as well? Yes, but only if the power is achieved and used according to the way demonstrated, taught by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and followed by his companions. The above statement is history, and so organically true. Historical events cannot be squashed or erased, and even if the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is skimmed or skirted, it will be seen that all his life, his efforts, his hazardous struggle was only aimed to eliminate, crush, fight, and subdue the evil, fasad, disorder, zulm, injustice, and establish the supremacy of justice, good, fair play, and piety. In 623 AD, the Prophet, peace be upon him, founded a fragile, insecure caliphate inspired with lofty ideals of human good, humanity, apathy for the entire mankind, foreshadowing peace, justice, free of all sides of tribalism, feudalism, ethnicity, all colors of parochialism, and providing social equality, economic well-being, freedom and liberty, and human brotherhood for the first time to the entire mankind. And jihad of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was to forestall all evil powers from pursuing the evil, creating zulm, evil, injustice, fasad, and disorder. This was the purpose of jihad, preventing all these evils. He conjoined the local Muslims, the migrants, various Jews and pagan tribes, binding them with a constitution which was acceptable to all religions and faiths. Thus, a political, social, economic unity was achieved with complete freedom for people of respective religions, faiths to follow their creeds, and their judicial cases were decided by the Prophet, peace be upon him, according to the respective religions, their laws, their customs, and their traditions. If any of the signatories of the Constitution were to be attacked, all were required to assist. A totally classless society came into being in which there was absolute political, social justice, and equality in economic opportunities, and justice and equality before law. There were times when the Prophet, peace be upon him, decided cases against the Muslims, whereas the prosecution complainants were non-Muslims. As regards the Prophet, deciding according to the respective book, a very well-known case was that of adultery in a Jew tribe. He decided the case strictly according to Torah, in which both were proven guilty with the evidence of all Jew witnesses and then stoned to death. The punishment exists in Islam as well. For 10 trying years, when the very existence of the state and that of a few hundred Muslims was at stake, the Jew tribes violated the constitution repeatedly and constantly with deleterious effects. Rather than assisting the Muslims against the aggression of the pagans, the Jew tribes repeatedly joined the pagans to eliminate the Muslims and crush, destroy the state. The Prophet, peace be upon him, tolerated them for long and eventually, as his parting words, advised the companions to extradite them from Arabia permanently. The Prophet tolerated them for long and eventually, as his parting words, advised the companions to extradite them from Arabia permanently. All measures against the Jew tribes were in accordance with Torah and Quran. It is now a historical verity, truth, almost eternalized, that the society, people who have allowed themselves to be guided, influenced by the Jews, were ultimately held by the nose and pushed to ruination, destruction. Whereas the societies that got rid of them escaped their treachery and ruination. Humanity would never approve what the Germans did with the Jews. The Holocaust, in which in mid-20th century 60,000 Jews burnt alive. Had the Germans followed the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the criminals, treacherous with solid evidence against them, could be killed, like those of Banu Qurayza in 625 AD, and all others allowed to live with all their assets. Yet some say the nature of the Jews has remained unchanged. There must have been reasons that the Germans were so hard-bitten against them. Even today, in the 21st century, it's being alleged that there must be the influence of the Jewish lobby that USA has endangered its own political and economic interests by fighting for the Jews in the Middle East. The Prophet's, peace be upon him's jihad was a benediction, blessedness, a means, a strategy of emancipation of the mankind, to rescue it of economic exploitation, social stratification, in which the miserable, the poor, the slave had a status hardly better than the animals. The communists killed 30 million people in the first quarter of the 20th century. The communists killed 30 million people in the first quarter of the 20th century and yet failed to achieve their objectives. His jihad, Prophet Jihad, assisted in giving women their right as equal human beings at a time when women were beaten up, smacked, and kicked and left in the jungles during the periods, not only in Arabia, in fact, all over the world, and none could declaim even against girl infanticide, which strangely enough has prevailed in certain central areas, Bahawalnagar in Pakistan and Gujarat in India, in the Indian subcontinent till the beginning of the 20th century. Sati was abolished by the British government in India with a lot of hindrance in early 20th century. Unfortunately, the status of women in the Indo-Pak subcontinent is much against the dynamic, revolutionary, humane, and humanistic values given by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and has been influenced by the curse of centuries of old feudalism, tribalism, Sardari system, bigotry, illiteracy, economic and social deprivations, and Hinduism. Everything the Muslims do is not Islamic according to the teachings of the Prophet. I repeat, everything the Muslims do is not Islamic according to the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as everything the Catholics do is not the teachings of the Jesus. If the Muslims had followed the epoch-making model of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and had done what the Prophet, peace be upon him, had taught them to do, they wouldn't have been la miserable, the most miserable, weak, party-stricken, downtrodden, ill-reputed, defamed, humiliated, and disliked as they are today. We learn from history that, like the companions and their immediate followers, those who would follow the Prophet, peace be upon him, would rule the world, not to impose neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, or corporate globalization, economic exploitation of other nations, or cultural arrogance, or cultural assertion, but for justice, compassion for the destitute, and disenfranchised political, economic, and social rights for all the peoples, societies of the world, based on equality, fraternity, and human brotherhood, all united to eliminate, subdue, crush the evil, zulm, injustice, anywhere and in all its forms, to crush, eliminate, subdue the evil, zulm, injustice anywhere and in all its forms. The Muslims shouldn't be enraged when it is stated that most, rather than working for the supremacy of Allah's religion, are a prima factor in keeping the non-believers a mile away from making any efforts at knowing Islam and the Prophet, peace be upon him. I repeat, the Muslims shouldn't be enraged when it is stated that most of us, rather than working for the supremacy of Allah's religion, are a prima factor and in keeping the non-believers a mile away from making any efforts at knowing Islam or the Prophet, peace be upon him. More so, when a large faction of the Muslims believes that the Western media is mysteriously, harshly geared to Islam bashing for reasons beyond the spiteful deed of a few ill-motivated individuals, agencies on 11 September 2001. A majority of mankind doesn't also consider that the Muslims today are as away from following the Prophet, peace be upon him, as the Christians, Jews, or Buddhists are from following Jesus, Moses, or Buddha. Additionally, there isn't a model Islamic society in the world that people could know, see what Islam actually is. I repeat, additionally, there isn't a model Islamic society in the world that people could know, see what Islam actually is. Rationally, all these should impose a far greater sense of responsibility on the Muslims. All these should impose a far greater sense of responsibility on the Muslims. Constantly, rather concomitantly, simultaneously, the Muslims should not blink away their inherent obligation to influence the mankind to follow the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in all matters, to make the world a better living place for all the societies, rich or poor, all the peoples of the world. The merciful Prophet established a multi-faith state and with certain principles and rules which allowed every individual not only to live according to his light, but live with equality, fraternity, and liberty as defined by the respective creeds in the 7th century AD. The mankind can surely do the same today with those very set of rules, principles. It has to follow Muhammad to learn to live peacefully in the world. It has to follow Muhammad, peace be upon him, to learn to live peacefully in the world. His constitution was neither syncretism, that is merging or attempting reconciling of the beliefs and practices of different religions or philosophies, nor based on secularism. It was a spontaneous generation of the eternal code of Allah. It was a spontaneous generation of the eternal code of Allah. Islam is a global religion. Islam is a global religion. It is the only ideology tailored, structured specifically to the entire mankind to enable it coexist smoothly, comfortably, and peacefully in a global village ad infinitum forever. That is, till the existence of the world. Its principles, values, do's and don'ts, the liberty and constraints are based on the very nature of man, wherein both the man and the ideology are created by Allah. It is the only ideology tailored structures specifically to the entire mankind to enable it to coexist smoothly, comfortably, and peacefully in a global village ad infinitum forever, till the existence of the world. Its principles, values, do's and don'ts, the liberty and constraints are based on the very nature of man, wherein both the man and the ideology are created by Allah. The ideology of Quran and Sunnah are created by Allah. That's all for today. Please pray for me, ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah.